So welcome to the Gate Bar podcast, the GAB podcast. This is the first of the sort of business side episodes. So we've just finished recording our first technical side where we discussed everyone's entry into their career, which was quite good. So now I thought I'd run through the start of starting Gate Bar and focusing on the timing. And I'll start off by saying there's probably no perfect time, and by no means did I pick the perfect time. But there's a few things that I think I could have done better, or pat myself on the back too much, that worked in my favour. I won't say I did well. I'll say worked in my favour. I think might be mildly interesting to some people. So I'll sort of jump straight into it, and for this episode it'll be just me, but I think for the next episode and looking further down the sort of business timeline, we'll be joined by a guest who can add in their perspective. But just for this episode, so the timing of setting up a business. So my background is building surveying. Sort of gone through on the technical episode the route that I took to get to being a chartered building surveyor. And I think from there to setting up your own practice, there's probably a few things you can do in employment, or a lot of things you can do in employment to really cement your position in the market whilst you're still in employment. And I think the first thing is just understanding the breadth of what you know, and maybe understanding the breadth of what the people know around you as well is probably as important. So my career started at a small practice based in York. When I say small, there was probably 15 people in the office. I think that was a great starting point for a career. The 15 people in the office were spread between building surveyors. I was sat between a senior QS, fantastic lady who really knew her stuff, a conservation accredited surveyor, and a really knowledgeable building surveyor as a director who's now FRICS. That sort of environment and open plan office, it just bred so many natural conversations and so many little insights that you don't realise how important they are until you come across it yourself. And I think that environment breeds a fantastic, well-rounded surveyor. And I think in this industry, if you're going to set up your own practice, and even not in this industry, probably any business, if you're going to set up your own company, your own practice, you need to know the breadth of the company. I don't think you could sit there and understand one thing or do one thing and set up a business and then try and do everything. I think you'd have so many gaps in even I'm not going to say I'm the expert in all those things, but I have an understanding, I have an appreciation of them. I think that's building that knowledge is probably step one to working out when the perfect time is. Build up what you know in that industry, build up what your gaps are, what you don't know, and try to understand what you're good at. I think that's the key in that first experience gaining, and probably first role in the career, or first, second, third role in the career, depending on how far you move around. So I stayed in that firm for 5 years or so. The firm changed quite a lot in my time there. The historic the conservation accredited building surveyor that I worked heavily with had left for maternity leave. My director had left for a national consultancy in South Yorkshire, so it was time to leave. And at that point, I thought about setting up on my own. And I think the only thing that stopped me, I say only thing, there was probably a million things, and it's quite a daunting thing to do. But I thought that it was my only job. That's probably worth clarifying. That was the only role I'd had at a surveying firm, at a chartered surveying firm outside of uni. So I'd been there 5 years. I thought I knew everything. And I just thought, if I take that step now, chances are I've missed something. something that company didn't do, or something that company did that wasn't right, but yeah, just something missing. And it probably comes back to that breadth of knowledge. There was probably something there in the business world that they didn't do that I was going to have to do in my business world. So I decided not to set up then, but I'd had that idea for quite a while, and I went over to Leeds. It's a well-trodden path between York and Leeds when you get chartered and command a better salary and join a national firm, a bigger firm, and flex your muscles a little bit. And that was what I did. I went over to Leeds, joined a national consultancy, 6 offices, 4 times the turnover that the small company had, 80 odd staff. So it was a decent size outfit, and I really went there to make sure my breadth of knowledge, and this is both technical and a bit of business acumen, just to make sure I wasn't missing anything. So it was a much larger turnover business. There was different functions. There was, just a different hierarchy. It was broadly split the same in terms of teams and competencies. Yeah, it was a good fit for the time, and I certainly learnt things that I wanted to replicate, things that my first experience couldn't show me, and probably things that I didn't want to replicate from both practices. The first practice was a long in the tooth established practice, was the amalgamation of 2 older practices, whereas the second firm I went to was a relatively young. It was in its first 10 years at the time, so it was a relatively young practice, and acted that way as well, which was quite refreshing. Once I'd been there, I was there for 2 years. I knew I wanted to set up. I thought I was ready, and there was a couple of indicators that sort of told me it was the right time. And I've had this conversation with others at the time that I set up Gate Bar. Just why now? It seemed a silly time at the time because it was in the middle of the COVID pandemic. So it seemed like a really bizarre time to set up a business. But there was a few indicators or things that I had in my head that made it a much easier decision to make. So the first is probably home life. It's making sure that home life is set up for you to succeed. It's easy to focus on the business end of it, the clients, what sectors I'm going to go for. But I think that the first thing to get your ducks in a row on is home life. If it goes well, you don't need to worry about your home life. But you need to worry about your home life if it doesn't go well, or takes time to seed, or takes time to grow. And it's making sure you're in a position that gives you the confidence to give it a go. So it was little things like we bought our first house, me and my partner, now wife, when I was at that second role for 2 years. So we bought the house. It wasn't a stretch financially. It was a big commitment, buying a house is, but we got a really good mortgage rate. We used Help to Buy. We got a nice house. It wasn't the 3-bed double garage that we probably could have stretched to afford. It was comfortable. It did us for now, and it meant that our mortgage repayments weren't crippling. It didn't rely on us both maintaining the same level of income. I think that risk profile will depend on how far you are through your career and how far you are through home life or life, I guess. Having kids will, I won't say be another strain. I'll clarify that I don't have kids. But it's another commitment. And I tried to set up home life, intentionally or non-intentionally, I think, at the time, where we were comfortable. We had a house we knew we could afford, and at a push we could have probably afforded it on my partner's salary. Car payments, I had a car, I'd finished paying the car payments off. It still had life left in it. I was thinking about upgrading it. I just thought, no, let's keep it running. And just little decisions like that just put you in a position where you can go all in and you can give up a level of income or a level of freedom to fulfill the business, I think is really important. And coming back to the sort of dependence, it's picking the right time. If your relationship with your partner isn't in a great position, don't set up a business. Like it'll tear you apart. There needs to be that level of support there. There needs to be that level of understanding. And I won't say that, I said, I'm going to set up a business. I've got a well-paid job, but I'm going to set up my own business and risk it all. It'd be the wrong thing for your partner to say, yeah, go for it. You need that sounding board just to go, are you sure? Have you got this? Have you thought of everything? You need that disaster planner to go, what if? So setting up your home life in that way, if you can, is so important to make sure you're not on the verge of a massive life change, because you need to make sure that you can focus on the business for however long it takes to sort of get going. And I think outside of home life, it's the business side of it. So you want to set up and know that there's going to be the need, the requirement for whatever you're setting up, the client base there. And I was lucky in the fact that when I left my first practice and went over to the practice in Leeds, a lot of the clients followed me and they got in contact with me and said, where are you? Where have you gone? That's probably the biggest boost you can get as a professional, and especially before you set up a practice, is people asking after your services, because you always have in the back of your mind, and I think it gets drilled into you in a practice, that the name of the practice is the reason that your phone rings. And to be able to have that disconnect between the practice and the person, and the phone still rings, it's sort of the biggest pat on the back you can get. And that happened. I won't say, everyone I worked with was happy to work with me again at a different practice, because not every practice, not every scenario fits with every client, but the majority did. And I thought, well, I could do this again, and I would hope, there's no guarantee that they'd come with me again. So I think the sort of second part of it, outside home life, is the timing in terms of business, the client base, making sure when you do jump, you've got something to jump into, maybe not right away, but something to nurture, or someone will come looking for you, I guess. And I had that, luckily. Well, I guess part luckily and part the hard work for the last 7 years paying off. But I think the most difficult bit with that is you're likely to be working with those clients on active projects in employment at the time that you set up on your own. And depending on company structure and restricted covenants, there'll be a period of time where you can't work with the same client, or it'll take a little while to switch over. And what you don't want to do is raise your hand and say, right, I'm out, and the client's in the middle of one of their most stressful projects and they're relying on you to be there. Because I don't think I've ever been at a practice where I've left and that handover procedure has been even close to acceptable with the client. It's always seen as do we have to hand over Nathan's projects? And with the best will in the world, if you jump ship at the wrong time when the client is relying on you, they're not going to come to you. That's it's like running away from their project, saying, "Oh, sorry, you're on your own." And I know that the practices that I work for did pick up projects and pick up clients and still maintain the relationship, but it's making sure it happens at the right time for you, happens at the right time for the clients that you want to continue working with, and that it works from a business sense. There's no guarantee. I think that's the thing to stress, is you can do an amazing job for an amazing client for years, but they'll be reliant on having a bigger practice, or the decision makers, the directors, will say, no, we can't go with Nathan because he's on his own. What happens if Nathan gets run over by a bus? And things like that, which I've had and, we've overcome. But yeah, it's making sure that there will be a market for your services. And I think in developing that jump, it's all about, because you can't float it. You can't float the idea. That's not fair on the business you're working in. You can't float the idea to clients just to say, oh, I'm going to go on my own. Are you coming with me? You sort of have to have faith in what you're doing and jump and expect people to follow, or expect people to pick up the phone. And that's sort of like the mental business side of it is this the right time? And then I guess the other side for me, and on a less general note, is I was happy in my role at the national consultancy. I'd built up a really nice little team. It was me and 2 graduate surveyors, and we were churning through loads of work. And we were getting really busy. I was excited about what the projects that were coming with our clients. And the pandemic hit. And I've probably glossed over this in the past, but one of the surveyors was fired. Unfortunately, he was in his 2nd week on the job, and the business made the decision to fire him. And the other one was furloughed. And I was sat there delivering all the work still. None of our work really had dropped off. It was the larger commercial schemes for the wider practice that had made that redundancy and that furlough a necessity. And whilst I understood the business decision behind that, I felt a bit hard done by that it wasn't my team that dropped fees, so it shouldn't have been my team that dropped members. But that comes with being an employee. You have to accept that. You're not running the business. It's their business to run. And if that was the right decision for them to make at the time, then that was the right decision. Yeah, I won't sit here today and say I think that was the right decision from my little pigeonhole, because it meant that I was doing the work of 3 surveyors. And at the time, we'd all had a 20% pay cut. So I was sat there on 20% less doing the work of 3 surveyors. And that sort of kicked me into just going, right, this is the time. But I think if that had pushed me and I hadn't had the other things in line, the sort of lining up the business, the client base, and sorting out home life, I don't think that pushing me at that time would have been right. And then I guess the other thing is just the monetary side of it. It costs money to set up a business, probably not as much as you think. That's no secret. I think in building surveying, in consultancy firms, it's all relying on this sort of smoke and mirrors. Oh, you can't do it yourself because the barriers to entry, you won't get PI, you won't get professional indemnity insurance. How much does an office cost, or anything like that? You couldn't possibly do it. And I was conscious of that, and we weren't well off at the time. We were well paid, and both me and my now wife have good jobs. So we had a bit, we had some funds, but nowhere near what you think you can start a business with. So I had to wait. I was due a performance-related bonus at the company I was at, and as soon as I received that paid for the website, the marketing, a bit of cash in the bank to keep me going for those couple of months. That bonus after tax went straight into the new business bank account, and that was the first sort of investment in the business. And to date, that's the only investment that the business needed. I'll say it wasn't an enormous bonus, 2.5 times my monthly salary in one paycheck. So that was just enough to tip us over into being able to afford these things without having a loan or debt against the company, which was quite important to me. I think, I'm not sure, I've never been one for borrowing money or acquiring loans or anything. So I think that was important to me to self-fund that. And if it took a bit longer that way, I was happy with that. I don't think there's ever a right time. And looking back, I could have probably stayed it out for another couple of years. And I was talking with a former colleague the other week about the salary price rises or the salary rises at the moment. For that first year, I would have been much better off financially staying in employment. I could have commanded a great salary, and once the lockdowns and bits like that had finished and we'd got over the sort of horrors of COVID, could have commanded a great salary and made a great income. But it's not always about that, and having the freedom to run a business, has paid off. But there's no right time. I don't think there's really a wrong time. There's just once you've got your ducks in a row, home life, financial, and that client base, I think they're the bits you can do in employment to make sure when you do set up on your own, it works or it has the best chance of working. So I hope that wasn't too dull, too boring. And like I say, we'll be joined by a guest to sort of run through the next sequence or the next bit of business, of setting up a business, of startup for the next episode. And if there's anything I've spoken about today that you want to know more about or suggestions for the next episode, then please get in contact with us, leave a comment or send us an email. I'll see you for the next podcast.